Good morning, everyone. Is everyone here from the class? Except for the debaters. Okay, this is part of our regular class, but since this is a special event, I would like to start specially. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Kyushu University, Ito campus. This is part of the Japan-US Exchange Debate 2017. The whole program is supported by Japan Debate Association and the CIDD, Committee on International Discussion and Debate of the National Communication Association of the United States, and it's financially supported also by GTEC. And the local program here is co-sponsored by Kyushu University, Faculty of Language and Cultures, and Japan Debate Association Kyushu Chapter, and also supported by the English-Speaking Society. And today we have demonstration debate going through the whole process of debate. Since we are the class, excuse me, our debating class is working on the speeches and hasn't got through to the point of watching the whole debate. This demonstration debate will give our students to see how the whole process of debate works. And also, this is open to public, so I have some people who are not in our class. This is a so-called academic policy debate, so students are taking the side assigned. That means they are not saying their own beliefs. They are playing the role of the affirmative and the negative side. And the topic we have is the U.S. law enforcement agencies, such as the FBI, should have the right to force technology companies, such as Apple, to provide backdoor access. And we have two students on the affirmative from our class, two students from our class on the negative side, and they'll be joined by two American debaters, Mr. Elijah Smith from Wake Forest University and Ms. Allison Faust from Regis University. And after the debate, the accompanying coach, Dr. John Kephart, the Associate Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Forensics at California State University, Northridge, will give some feedback. Okay, without further delay, I would like to welcome the teams, debaters, front. They're in. Okay, so maybe affirmative that time. Okay, affirmative and the negative. And we have a formatted flow sheet, special sheet for you to take notes on. In our class, you watch the video how to take notes, so try taking notes. Since this is part of the video and also public event, may I have a few words from each of the participants? Just a few words.
So I think today's topic is really important as somebody who lives in the United States who, and you will see in the implications or the different arguments that are made in the debate of, people's rights, people's safety, people's privacy, what access the government should have to your phone or to your privacy. These are all issues that are being really hotly debated in the United States, especially in a world where I'm sure many of you know about Donald Trump. So Americans are feeling a little uneasy right now. So I think, at least for me, that this is a really important topic. And I think Team Affirmative has some good things to say to you all today about it. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming in to listen to the debate, and I hope that we make a couple of good arguments.
Okay, that Elijah Smith, the American team member's bio is on the back of the program. So thank you, Elijah, and maybe just a few words from our students. Maybe name
today.
Yeah.
I first of all, thank you everybody for attending this debate. I feel really honored to be part of this demo debate. It's actually a really good chance for me to practice, and hopefully I hope that you guys will get to learn something more about this debate as well. It's like at this first 10 minutes or maybe half an hour as I preparing with Eli, I've learned actually quite a lot, and I believe so do you guys will be in this upcoming debate. Thank you very much.
Me as well? Yeah, thank you. I was actually preparing a lot for this speech. And actually, this is my first time doing the debate itself, so it's kind of like nervous. But then I hope that you guys can learn as much as I do, because apparently debating is not only about like winning and like about getting our arguments right, but it's about like the process of thinking itself, the process of like acquiring data and like processing it to get the result. Maybe it's not what we initially expected, but I hope it's the process of thinking itself is what matters, I think. That's all from me. Thank you.
Well, I think this is been a really good opportunity for me to learn a lot about debating, because I haven't had experience in debating at all, basic knowledge of this, and I'm really happy that I get to learn and experience this firsthand. And I hope that everyone could learn just as I do.
Hello, my name is Allison. I'm just so excited to be here today because I think, kind of as Eli was saying, that this is a really important topic that a lot of government officials kind of don't want young people to understand, right? Is this idea of these phones and these tablets and these laptops that we're on all of the time, every day, and our lives are here. And what it really means to be a young person in the 21st century when we have scary ideas about terrorism, about globalization coming up, and what that means that your entire life can be unlocked at the will of your government. So even though a lot of the evidence that's going to be thrown around today is going to sound very, very technical and very far away, I think that there are very few issues that affect us more as young people today than this issue. And I guess the only other thing I would want to add to that is thank you guys for coming and for being an audience willing to see this, and just acknowledging how hard it is to get up in front of your peers and to talk with such confidence about so many technical issues. Like, we appreciate your patience, and if this is something that interests you, please come and talk to your local director and talk about how cool debate can be if you like it, or if you have any questions after this. Like, any of us would love to continue that conversation. Thanks, guys.
It's kind of hard to follow up with that. So. But anyway, yeah, it's my first time debating as well, and it doesn't help that I have to debate in front of a lot of people, and even though I like to talk. So I hope, today, for me personally, I can learn from both Allison and Eli and my friends here, and I hope that you guys can also learn little things or two about debate. And because like Allison said this, and Eli also said, this case is interesting and it is relevant to us as young people, then hopefully you can learn also something rather than just the debate is also about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess I don't have a microphone. Please speak loud enough so that everyone can hear. And We will follow the format of the policy debate in the textbook we are using. Basically, there are 2 constructive speeches from each side, and each is followed by cross-examination. And then we will get into rebuttal speeches, first and second rebuttal speeches from both sides. I will try to block the time, but because it's a demo debate, I want you to finish the important argument so that the timing is a little bit flexible. Okay, we'd like to start the debate. There are some people just coming in, so. Okay, we'd like to start the debate by hearing the first affirmative constructive speech. Time limitation is 6 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Kevin, and today I'd like to start my speech. I'm from the affirmative team, and we would like to state that backdoor access should be implemented for all electronic devices, because our current society, with loose law regarding electronic devices, the digital world and technology has allowed terrorism to mingle around us. But then, without a proper tool, which is a backdoor access, we will not be able to solve these criminal cases, and also we will not be able to prevent, or even if we could not prevent, we will not be able to decrease criminal cases. So our motion is based on this plan. The following steps should be done to provide backdoor access for the U.S. law enforcement agencies. First, within 2 years, all software companies should update their software with the backdoor access installed. The backdoor access key should be saved offline without copies in each company's main office. Second, a law should be made regarding the amount of time or ban for products sold within the U.S. without a backdoor access installed. The information gained from the phone can be used legally to sue the criminal. Third, the government should provide aids if necessary to maintain the country's economic condition. The implementation of this plan would give U.S. law enforcement agencies the right to access personal electronic devices legally, freely, with a warrant. This plan will lead to prevention of criminal and terrorism act, and to find criminal effectively for a case that has already happened. Contention 1. Harms. The current system is not effective at stopping terrorism. Subpoint A. The current system forces the law enforcing agencies to build a key so as to decrypt a certain device to access the information if the technology companies do not agree to accommodate. Breaking into a cryptographic program is impossible without a key. In a meeting on the topic global security in London, the FBI's director stated that it cost them a minimum of $1.3 billion to decrypt the iPhone in order to access the desired information. The current law is almost 200 years old. Thus, this must be restated to aid the government. Bernard E. 2016. FBI director suggested bill for iPhone hacking top $1.3 million. Subpoint B. The procedure to obtain data from an electronic device takes a lot of time. The first news of USA Today regarding the order to crack Bernardino's shooter's iPhone in February showed how slow the evidence collecting process was, as the case was started in December, Johnson going 2016. If this time can be reduced, the amount of time, resources, and work spent on cracking electronic devices can be transferred to find more evidences. Subpoint C. It takes a lot of money to hire the IT experts to open the electronic devices. The New York Times mentioned that FBI spent $1.3 million to hire a group of hackers. Subpoint D. The IT experts' availability is very low in the USA. This was shown as the FBI was trying to hire some IT experts for some other cases. However, as it is true that there are a lot of IT experts available in the US and capable of getting hired to solve cases. However, the problem arises when they are presented with the requirements of having no crime records, as Killian, 2014. FBI could not hire hackers on cannabis to fight cybercrime. Subpoint E. Terrorists often make use of smartphone networks to communicate to their network members in order to execute their plans. Encryption makes it hard to track the digital trail. New York Times reported that the Islamic State's ISIS members were in contact with the attackers from Syria using applications that provide end-to-end encryption. This was during the Paris attack. In general, ISIS uses Telegram, which allows them to form a group of up to 200 members and communicate using the encryption. In October, the Middle East Media Research Institute reported that Al-Qaeda and ISIS formed several groups on Telegram to exchange information such as the production of weapons, Gallagher as 2015, ISIS using encrypted apps for communication. Former Intel officials blamed Snowden updated. That concluded my first affirmative speech. Thank you.
Cross-examination from you have 3 minutes.
First, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. To begin with, is it possible to get a copy of your plan text?
Fine. Yes.
Thank you very much.
This one is basically the same, but more.
Awesome, thank you so much. So let's walk through what the affirmative plan is today. So first you tell me that terrorism is the largest problem that we need to solve for in the status quo. Is that correct?
We were saying that it is one of the major problems that we need to solve.
Okay, so essentially whoever can win today's debate should best be able to provide for terrorism or the security of the citizens of the nation. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. So let me walk through this. Like, what would this look like in real life? If I'm hypothetically at the airport and I look suspicious, will a TSA agent grab my phone and be able to unlock it? Or how would this process work in real life?
Oh, it is stated. It is stated that we need a warrant to because the main problem is to solve cases at the beginning. But then if the law itself can be updated, then we can make it more powerful if it's desirable or if it's needed.
So because we're getting a warrant first, that this would mean that it would essentially be a longer amount of time before the government could come in and unlock your phone, correct?
No, it's if there is a problem, then they would be given the warrant to access any phone in the area, for example.
Well, I think one of the reasons I'm wondering is if I choose to go in and delete something off of my phone before you can obtain a warrant, will having this backdoor access really do anything?
Yes, because the system itself is not deleting the whole files.
Okay.
Because they always make a backup copy, but then the users will not be able to access it. However, the system itself still has the copy.
What if I completely destroy my phone? What will happen?
Destroying one's phone is quite hard because they still have the components, and then if we can retrieve the components, then it is
Okay.
yeah.
And so how critical would you say it is to have technology in order to fight terrorism?
I'd say because from the late news we see, the terrorism acts are all based on group acts, and those yeah.
So let me rephrase. How often are we able to stop terrorist attacks by intercepting electronic communications?
It's not that often.
Not
Not that often, but we'll be able to stop the major attacks.
Can you give me an example?
The example is was the Paris attack last time.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Can I get the first two?
I just need to see the plan first. Thanks.
Each has 8 minutes of preparation time they can use before their speech.
Okay. Do you want to use some more time?
In total, yes.
Maybe we'll do 2 minutes now. Is that okay? Let's do 2 minutes. Start. Okay.
The thing is that the only one that we can like really debate about is the clash. Yeah, so we can clash it out. So they can,
Yes.
But these two doesn't have indirect.
So we could say. Okay, so what you're going to say is that one starts with such letter, and we can see that this clashes directly with their first intention. And then you're going to say to extend this, we think that more negative things will happen specifically. And then you say, so this is our subpoint 2, which is the second intention, or second intention.
It doesn't, I don't have to really get to it.
No, you're not. Because you're extending. You're saying this bad thing is going to happen, so we're just going to tell you what, because they don't want to talk about the bad things that happen. Yeah. Kephart. Which one? Yes. Ooh, that's a good point. Do you could write out an argument? Do you want to do that?
Because it's
Yes, this is just the opening. So we can choose or so actually, this is called. Oh, okay. You guys want to stop here?
Before they go to jail.
Okay, we'll stop.
We don't have jails.
Okay. 6 minutes.
Yes, they might have a heart attack. Yeah, that might happen. It's not a reason to not have jails.
Okay, we'd like to welcome the first negative constructive speech.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Now I'm going to present the first negative case speech. So we already heard what the affirmative case said. And firstly, I want to say, like, yeah, that's not what's going to happen. In reference to the first contention the affirmative said, like, they say that the government is going to have difficult access to the phone to crack criminal cases, and it's going to make it difficult to decrease criminal cases and everything. But actually, like, government can get access to the information regardless, and lack of backdoor access is not a problem. It is said by WITS 2016 that in many cases of online sexual crime, not having access to criminals' phone is not a limiting factor to the investigation, because the online service providers and perpetrators cooperate when approached by law enforcement of their own volition. And then, also said by Yadron in 2016, the company America's Most Valuable argued that creating such software will force the company to betray its value along with the security and privacy of all its consumers. Like the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, argued that if Apple were to force to re-engineer their product, it would like open a Pandora box that would give the government outside control over how Silicon Valley makes its product. Like, not only this, there are other negative things that could happen if the plans of the affirmative were to be implemented. The first one, the second point is like government might misuse the backdoor access, as their previous actions suggest that they do not care much about warrant and legality. According to the EFF, FBI misused a single warrant to access thousands of devices, which is unconstitutional. And also, it is said that FBI installed a device that could spy on and grab data from tens of thousands of cell phones without a warrant. Next, backdoor access is also a security threat, because before backdoor access is created, U.S. data breaches is already occurring, and it hits the highest number, which is 781 in 2015. If the backdoor access is implemented, the number of data breaches would increase more as it is easier to access this. This is the data from Identity Theft Resource Center. And the third negative thing that could happen if their plan were to be implemented is the privacy rights. the privacy right of the people will be breached. Privacy right is a fundamental freedom that should be protected, especially in the United States, where freedom of speech is one of the highest values they uphold. The consumer privacy and for the people, consumer and privacy for the people is a basic human right that should not be violated. However, the backdoor access is the nothing to hide argument. Said that even though they're not doing anything wrong, everyone has personal matters that they want to hide, and rightfully so. And this is what Schroth in 2016 said. And the code of the digital device can be treated as a form of speech. So encryption and codes can be treated as a speech, hence its freedom is protected under the Constitution. Even though the codes might seem to be illegible to people who do not understand them, to IT companies they are treated as a free expression, and thus is protected under the First Amendment, which states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. Lord, 2016. I want to conclude my negative case outline here. Thank you very much.
Okay. I just have a few questions. Do dead people need privacy?
Do who?
Do dead people need privacy?
Well, if you say like privacy as in their grave is not disturbed, then yes, if you consider that as privacy.
Well, not quite. I don't think I would be as bothered. So you have not answered our argument that terrorism is real, that you can tweet, you can DM ISIS, you can send them a snow. So ISIS is real and wants to hurt people, specifically Americans. Do Americans need to be alive, or do they need to hide like dirty text messages? Like, which one is more important?
Well, they do need to access have access to like this terrorist phones or whatever. But like, what is the percentage of the terrorist phone like in regards to the people in general? Like, how many percentage can you say like by opening this backdoor access you can like for certain get the access to the terrorist phone without hurting the privacy of the people?
Absolutely. You say that internet service providers mean that we don't need backdoor access. So I'm not a tech major. I study like government and like nonprofits. So you might need to help me out here. I know internet service providers can show you where someone's location. They can show you what websites they visited. Can they show you what is in the phone? So if I put my lock code, I just got a new fancy phone, and if I put my finger on it, it'll open the phone. Can the ISP do that?
To the extent of my knowledge, no.
No. Okay, thank you. So ISPs will not be able to tell us what are on the phones of people like the San Bernardino shooter. My next question is, you've made a lot of claims about government misuse of this technology. You made that's a very large claim. What for about a government that is pretty universally respected in terms of like human rights, right? So I think we do some pretty good human rights leadership, right? I want to know a country in the world that doesn't violate human rights. Could you name me a country in the world that doesn't violate human rights?
I'm not good at history, so I can't tell you that.
Okay. So what evidence do you have that the government will misuse this program?
Well, it gives them more access to. See, the thing is, like in this era of technology, like if you're saying something about human rights, it's usually like, I'm not saying human rights is a thing of the past, but like the cases like when we talk about human rights, it's usually like in the era where technology is not as prevalent as today. So if in today's world we have technology and we get access to people's phone and people's data like through that technology, then there is the higher possibility of the government misusing those data.
How much higher? Okay.
Okay.
take
Right, and
those.
you want to get to the argument, so you need two arguments.
We have drones.
You don't need cases. The government will misuse it, and you have to rate the privacy. Those
So
are the two
like,
arguments.
imagine saying to a thing like,
Don't worry
let's
about
take
that.
people,
Let me two
let's
arguments.
get them, and
The
we're
government
gonna
will misuse the program and in violation of privacy. You need to say, A, terrorists don't have
Ever.
privacy, and B, the government, even if they misuse the program, it is more important to stop terrorism.
Imagine those same people, but now the government can look at your phone whenever you want. And now they
Yeah,
can
you can
report
have any
you
venture.
in
Those are
prison.
the two arguments that makes privacy and government.
This is the whole purpose.
What is
We're gonna get hurt because of
every government violates rights.
And
That's
so
not a
now
reason
it's
not to do
basically,
it.
it's like, if I think that John is a terrorist, now I can take his phone and I can find something that could loosely be scary. And I'm gonna live in prison forever.
So this dimension,
That's not good.
you just say they're gonna be specific in your organization. So your job now is actually focus on this.
When you go in prison. Wow, when you kill people, when you get because I'm so good at processed food
And maybe
with delicious snacks and fast food. But this is fast food in America. So the question is, do we want to be good at fast food?
I think
Or do we want to get better at human rights?
you're ready,
Because
you're
if we
good.
go there, the only thing we're going to be good at is fast food.
You should take 2 to 3 minutes. If you don't need the whole 5 minutes, don't take the whole 5 minutes. But you can set, you can talk about this for 5 minutes, for 3 minutes.
Tell me what to feel. Then you say, I'm going to do some job. And then say,
Make it so that privacy is not necessary. Yeah, go now.
We'd like to welcome the second affirmative constructive speech. You give the second affirmative instead. It's not really a customary practice for the same speaker to give two constructive speeches, but since this is the demo debate,
All right. Thank you. Thank you thank you Negative team for the comments you've mentioned before. We got three major issues that you mentioned before, which is the first is the government are still able to get the information. The second, without the backward access. Second one is the misuse of backward access without warrant. Basically the misuse of system. The third one is the right to privacy. So I'd like to discuss the first one, the government, which can still get the informations. However, it was mentioned that there are still some phones that are still locked, which means that we cannot access we still are not able to access some useful information to some evidences, in which these evidences are still not solved. These cases are still not solved because they don't have the evidences needed. So, but then second, the misuse of backward access without warrant. Well, as mentioned before, we have our plan in which it is stated in the first plan. The following steps must be done to provide better access. First, within 2 years, all software companies must update their software with the backdoor access installed. The backdoor access, its key should be safe offline, without copies in each company's main office. In this sentence, there are two main ideas. The first one is the key should be safe offline. The second one is that it should be safe without any copies. In which, if this tool is very powerful, that means that it can only be used one time at a time, for one cases, in which they need a warrant to go to the technology companies, and then for them to use it. And even if this plan does not hold, well, there are bad guys everywhere. I mean, and these bad guys will still misuse everything. They still misuse anything they can misuse. But then this should not stop us. This should not stop the governments from getting the appropriate tool to fight criminalism. And last is the right to privacy. We think that it is clear that the government's first priority should be to fight terrorism, because terrorism is not about rights. Terrorism is about the citizens' lives themselves. That ends my second affirmative constructive speech. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. Don't laugh, people. Anyway, yeah. So I have a few questions about the arguments you've already said. Firstly, I don't quite understand about what do you mean by keeping the key offline. Like, can you elaborate more about that one?
There are another problems that might happen in which if the key is stored offline, it might get hacked by it can get be like the hackers can use like brute
So
force.
the key is not safe if it's kept
Yeah,
offline.
the key is not safe if it's kept online.
I'm asking about if it's kept offline.
Yes, if it's kept offline, then we can store it as a physical device,
Okay.
a physical object. I mean.
And that's safer how?
Because it's just like in analogy, it's just like when you're storing your money inside the bank. How can you be safe? Because
You're
they
saying
provide
bank is not safe now. I see.
no because because the bank itself provide some security measures.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, and the next point is you said that the key can only be used like one time per case. Like if there's one case, then you can only use the key for that case. Is that what you said? Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so hypothetically, what if there are two cases at once? So you can only deal with one case and you cannot deal with the other one.
Yes, but then by using vector access, the amount of time required to solve the case, to collect the evidences are very fast, in which we can just access all the phones within 1 day for this case, and then we can move on to the next case for the second day.
But we don't know which one is which case is more prevalent if we don't if we can't do it parallelly. Like we don't know which one is more prevalent, right?
Yes, then we can just collect the phones together and access all the data.
But you said it can only be used one time at a time.
Yes, it can only be used one time at a time. I mean, it can only be used one time at a time.
Okay.
But then it doesn't mean that we cannot collect the phones, right?
Okay. The last question I want to ask is about you said that in 2 years all the phone companies have to produce their phone that already have backdoor access. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think 2 years is enough time to change all the production? You know, like these companies don't just produce things to be distributed in USA, but also all around the world. So do you
Yes.
think it's enough time?
It's enough time, because if the government and the companies itself work together, that means that we get more manpower to actually to develop the
How
software
does
itself.
government work together with the company in this thing?
The government can like get some provide some technical supports available in the factory. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to welcome second negative constructive speech. And you please, 6 minutes.
All right, so I'm going to extend on the points that my friend made earlier about the inherency, which is that lack of backdoor access is not a problem in the first place. The possible misuse by the government agencies, the security threat, and the issue about the privacy rights. First, on inherency. The other team, the opposing team, kept mentioning about the case of, say, terrorism and San Bernardino, but it's important to note that even in that case, as stated by Swartz in 2016, that the FBI actually managed to crack that phone without the company's cooperation. So it would raise questions to whether or not we actually even need this backdoor access in the first place, or the FBI can still access information about terrorists. Second of all, on the possible misuse, this case is not just an isolated case, but this will set the precedent for the government to demand more and more of the access to the technology companies. So this could potentially allow the government to mandate allowance for other forms of digital information, as has happened historically before with cases like net neutrality and such in the US. And on the security threat, although you said it's going to be safe and secure and offline, a lot of experts, such as Tim Cook, as cited in Krishnan 2015, stated that if you have a backdoor in the software, there is no such thing as a backdoor that is made just for the good guys. When you make a vulnerability in the system, basically it's available for everyone to attack, so you can't really ensure that only good guys will use it. And as a consequence of that, data that is owned by everyone, not just perpetrators of criminals, because you're installing it to everyone's phones, that data could fall into the wrong hands, such as hackers, which is a national security risk. For example, as stated by Newman 2016, two hackers published evidence that hackers could exploit a feature on a software on a phone, and they could basically install a malicious software on the phone without the users noticing it. So basically we're just going to compound to that problem, and we're going to add a lot more security vulnerabilities that may be too big for the technology companies to handle. And not to mention, in the end, this would cause a turbulence in international security, because the US doesn't just make products for itself, it also exports these technological products outside of the US. This lack of encryption means that this would pose a risk to people who buy products from the US, and would probably cause an economic backlash if done. Not only that, historically, according to Kerry 2015, the United States has promoted technologies that help democratic activists avoid repressive surveillance from governments overseas. I think by installing an application that would allow themselves to do surveillance, they basically undermine their own values and basically just say to the international community that we don't really care about your freedom anymore. So, and then since America is such a big country, if the FBI forces the tech companies to weaken their security, what's likely going to happen is, according to Wong 2015, every other government would basically start using the US as an excuse to demand exactly the same thing, which would lead to basically everyone in all the world not having their privacy rights protected, which I think would be against the US interests. And finally, on the topic about privacy rights, although you did say that the issue of living, the issue of security is more important than civil rights, one big issue in the US right now, I think, is the issue of inequality in terms of things such as racial profiling, for example. I think by installing this backdoor access, what you're going to do is you're going to basically amplify the effects of such racial issues. For example, as Chamadi wrote in The Intercept, as reported by McLaughlin 2016, that racial justice activists have repeatedly stated their concerns that they've already been being under surveillance too much by the US law enforcement agencies. By giving them the tool to do so, will basically undermining their civil rights. Not to mention, what happens is, if there's an unlawful actor within the law enforcement agencies, it could potentially lead to those people doing hate crimes using the tools that they have available. In 2007, a University of Maryland study by O'Neill in 2016 explored the chilling effect, where basically when you alienate an entire community, what happens is the rest of the community won't want to cooperate for surveillance regardless of criminality. So what's going to happen is we're going to lose the trust of minority groups, and it's actually going to make the issue of terrorism worse because we're going to lose cooperation from a lot of American citizens. So to conclude, backdoor access will actually worsen the security threat. It will hurt the civil rights, and it will also lead to misuse by government actors. Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you very much for your speech. So first of all, I would like to address right into the first point. So you mentioned how the San Bernardino incident, tragedy, FBI managed to crack the phone. The question is, how long does it take?
It's about a year.
How much?
Oh, 1.3 million.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of money, isn't it?
Well, true, but this is an isolated case. How many other cases are there? There's probably none.
So do you think that it will likely to cost the same amount of money and duration of time in other cases as well?
Probably, but so far, I don't think there's been a huge case where this phone specifically has been an issue.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, I would like to ask you about the split key. You're saying that the hacker can always access the backdoor access, right? But the question is, can hacker hack offline stuff?
Well, that's true that they can't hack offline stuff, but you have to realize that not all companies aren't always filled like with good people. Generally speaking, how it works now is even if you're in the company, you can't hack into your own stuff because there is no backdoor access, there is no vulnerability to attack. But once you install that thing, if you're an employee of the company, when you want to hack into it, you can.
Yes, but wouldn't you agree that like, even if we don't have backdoor access, but the person inside the company want to hack into the phone, they will hack it anyway? Do you agree with that statement?
I don't agree because just as you said before, hacking into this thing is hard, and it even took the FBI at $1.3 million. Usually, a single employee wouldn't be able to do it, but now with backdoor access, they could.
So can you clarify how would the backdoor access actually give hackers a better option to hack into the phone?
Well, how it works is, with a system, encryption system, usually what it's designed to is it's designed to not have any vulnerabilities. But once you install a backdoor access system, you're basically announcing to the world, hey, there's a vulnerability in here somewhere, you just have to find it.
All right, thank you very much. Can you give us a definition? You did mention before how backdoor can actually have the negative impact similar to the surveillance system by the government. I'm not quite sure if this is actually the same thing, backdoor access and surveillance, because for me it does seem like a completely opposite, different topic.
Because what's happening right now is like people still try to access, like people still try to search you. It happens a lot called racial profiling. They just based on your race, like they just think you're like suspicious and they search your stuff. And if they have backdoor access, they can do that to your phones too.
So you're talking about racial stuff, and you are claiming that some of the minority will actually be affected by this. So do you think the government actually looked up those KKK, Ku Klux Klan?
Well, good answer.
The next speech is first negative rebuttal. Preparation time for the negative. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, take 3 minutes. 5 minutes. So, I don't have, but if you find yourself, you could just say, so, why should you vote for us? And then just explain what a policy debate is, basically, is you vote for the we think that what is currently happening is better than anything. Because we didn't have all these bad things happen that we already told you about. So if you just can make it very clear to the audience that that's how they should evaluate a new plan versus what we call status quo. So. Yeah, so maybe circle that on the flow and say, they really don't understand how important this is. Or they're trying to minimize it. Observation. Anything else that you think she should put this one? They keep saying so that doesn't make sense. Oh, maybe offline things doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah, so that shopping doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that we talked about before, they could, oh yeah, one warrant for 1,000 phones, like it doesn't have to be linked to an individual. I think that's, yeah, you want to take up my policy speech?
Okay, we'd like to welcome the first negative rebuttal speech. The time limit is 4 minutes.
Okay, hello again, everyone. So now I'm going to present the first negative rebuttal speech. Okay, so the affirmatives say that without having backdoor access, it's difficult to decrease criminal cases. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, terrorists are hard to track, and they have plans to make an offline version of a decrypting key to the phone's access. And they plan to do this in 2 years, and the government will aid the companies if necessary. Yeah, so we in the negative team say like these plans doesn't really make sense and it doesn't have any relevance. The first thing is they say something about the offline key, like even though they keep it offline, there will still be software updates and everything, and that means that the vulnerability is just going to be inserted back to the phones and it's going to be online regardless, and this means that their plan will not be safe. And then they said that they'll do it like in 2 years' time, and the negative team thinks that this doesn't make sense whatsoever because changing a law and especially changing a law and then changing the encryption in mass production cannot possibly be done in that short amount of time. And what we, the negative team, say, why the status quo works, why the system currently should not be changed, is because, like, firstly, the security threat is a fact. The government misuse the warrant, the government misuse the access they have. They don't have respect on warrants, like I mentioned before in my evidence. Like, one single warrant can be used for thousands of phones. It's not unique to one single individual. So if the government has just one warrant, they can like use it for everyone. So, which means that with backdoor access, this can be even worse because they have more access to more phones, and then also regarding the security threat, the plan, if they were to be implemented, then it will create an international turbulence. As we know that these phones aren't only distributed in the USA, it will also be distributed overseas. So if we make this plan about encryption universal, then it won't just affect one country, it's gonna affect the world. And secondly, the affirmative team doesn't really comment on the racial and minority thing. I believe that they don't quite understand what the prevalence of this problem. Like, privacy will be breached, that's true. Like, if we have backdoor access, then the privacy of the people will be breached. People would not be able to, like, they will trust the government less because they feel like, oh, I'm under surveillance of the government. And yeah, this will make like government have more, can attack on a certain group of people. Like, if we actually knows, like, in terrorism, the Muslim community is the one that always give updates to the government, but the government just don't listen to them. So if there is like this kind of backdoor access, they can just target only to the Muslim community or the other minority, and they won't want to cooperate with the government, and this will harm the security even more. So we can see like through that description that their plan will not be working, and the status quo is the one that should stand. Thank you very much.
Affirmative. You have 5 minutes remaining.
Which can be really hard to come up with new arguments.
Okay, would you like to welcome first Affirmative Rebuttal speech, 4 minutes.
So thank you very much, my affirmative speakers, and thank you the negative as well for giving us a debate today. However, we strongly believe that backdoor access is necessary. Let me emphasize you the necessity first in case it's not clear yet. So let me use this analogy. You want to buy a car, and then you are afraid of the car's going to get stolen, and then you are afraid of the car's going to get broke down, and then you're afraid of the gas price going to increase, so you don't want to buy a car. That makes absolutely no sense. It's the same goal for backdoor. Are you trying to say that there will be a problem, so we shouldn't introduce a system in? Are you trying to say that there will be bad people come try to steal our information, so you shouldn't make backdoor access? No, backdoor access is what we need. Bad people is everywhere, they exist, and they're gonna do bad things to us anyway. About the plan, we emphasize a lot on how we should keep the key offline. But then the negative keep emphasizing that it's actually kind of shaking the security of the nation. We would like to say it, expand on the plan that the key will be safe offline in the Pentagon, of which the highest security in the world is taking measure there. And also because we're taking the data of every single phone, there will be mass amount of data. So how can you just pinpoint to steal one particular phone? That doesn't make sense. So literally, they are making accusation without actually focusing on the offline aspect of our plan. And because of that, we still believe that our offline plan is actually going to work. Now, let's move on to the mentioning of the minorities. So we are trying to emphasize that government doesn't look at those minorities. Well, I would like to use this term some particular race. We're not targeting some particular race for no reason. We're targeting those who are dangerous. For example, Ku Klux Klan, KKK, government also surveilling those people, and what race they are white hair. What about those alt-right? Government surveilling those who are dangerous. They're actually not surveilling those for the sake of it. And of course, maybe you can argue there might be some victim to this surveillance of how people would get caught up in it. But then it doesn't doesn't imply anything, because they can always be a victim. The most important aspect is actually to group those dangerous group so we can track down. And I would like to put more emphasis on this. This backdoor access is actually much more different than the flight attendants or a street where the police can just walk up to you and check your warrants. In this backdoor access, if we notice there's a suspicious traffic within the electronic device, we have concrete evidence. We can save that. We can save that into our data. And because of that, when we can actually get a warrant to actually go arrest those people. It's actually much more different because this time we have concrete evidence. And another point to mention is about the law. They try to say it's impossible to change the law within 2 years. I would like to reaffirm my plan that first, within 2 years, all software company must update their software. And for the rest of our plan, law is not mentioned. Why? Because there will be no change in law. We only update the software for 2 years. And why? Because of that, because all the encryption key will be kept safe offline in the Pentagon. So we don't need any law to actually apply for that point. The final point that I want to make is still, we believe that the privacy is actually not an issue if we were to actually carry out this plan. And because of this backdoor access, we'll be able to save a mass amount of life, a ridiculous amount of life from terrorism. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take it. Do you have anything? Do you have anything? They can do what you're doing, just use one warrant to discriminate against people.
Now we'd like to welcome second negative constructive speech. Second negative rebuttal speech.
Congratulations to everyone in this room. You have almost survived a policy debate, and that in and of itself is a very miraculous occasion. Good job. So, what I'm going to do in your speech, because I know for many of you it's probably the first policy debate that you've watched, I'm going to explain very clearly why the negative has won today's debate, because I think that will help you best evaluate today's round. Let's first start, though, before we launch into why our arguments are really the ones that carry the most weight in today's debate, by looking at this example of the car analogy, because I think that this is a really great offer from the affirmative team. So what we get is that you shouldn't be afraid to buy a car because you're afraid it might be stolen someday. Instead, you should just buy the car. So what I want to tell you is this example, while good, is not necessarily what would happen with their plan. Instead, I want you to imagine that you're about to buy your very first car. You pick the color, you pick the model, you're really, really excited. But your parents permanently have keys to your car that they can choose to open your car whenever they want. They can go through your stuff whenever you want. They can take away the car whenever you want. And if you maybe have alcohol in your car that you weren't supposed to have, but they think you might have it, they can go in your car, find that alcohol, and then ground you for Lord knows how long. You could be grounded for weeks or months or years. Now think about that in the context of this motion. Imagine somebody could go into your phone and find something, maybe a contact with an uncle who has ties to ISIS or anything, and the government finds that threatening, and because the US has such a great record on human rights, they take you and they put you in Guantanamo for decades. That doesn't sound so much fun anymore, does it? This is essentially the arguments that we're advocating for on this side of the debate. So when you're evaluating who should win, you need to think, do we want to vote for this plan or do we want to vote for the status quo? Now, we're not saying that reality or the status quo or what's happening now is necessarily perfect, but we're going to say a lot less people get harmed in this world than the potential to be abused and exploited in this world. Let's talk about why, though. So what my team does truly excellently is they provide us with three very coherent arguments that I think really help boil down today's debate. So first we can see that we have this argument about security, right? So the negative team tells you that when you create access for this backdoor in this software update, it means that not only can the good guys or the government come in and unlock your phone, but essentially you're creating a lock that anyone can pick. And even though there's one official key, other people can still pick into this lock or into your phone and be able to unlock it. That's bad. But secondly, and the way that we really get nuance or this new perspective in today's debate is when they talk about what happens when you profile racial minorities. So now you can no longer assume that the government is always the good guy, because sometimes the government is the bad guy that discriminates based on race or other factors against individuals. Now you're giving them unlimited power to come in. Now the other team will get up and they'll say, no, you must have a warrant. But as we've read you through evidence, Currently, the US government will use one warrant in order to access thousands of individuals' data. We think that this is really bad. So if the US government puts out something tomorrow that says Japanese people are bad, and then uses that same warrant and that same logic to unlock all Japanese people's phones whenever they come into the US, that's terrible. Now, you may think, well, I don't have anything to hide, so it would be fine. But again, we have seen that the US government will actually try and find probable cause to find anything that could be taken as negative. How do we know this to be the case? When we look at someone like Martin Luther King, who was a famous civil rights activist in the United States, the FBI used to bug and wiretap his phone so they could try and find something negative to undermine him later. And we get this out of our evidence too when we talk about undermining democratic activities. In summary, we think that our security is better enhanced on this side of the house than what we're going to get with the new plan. Thank you.
Last speech. Second, affirmative rebuttal.
4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it is ironic that Allison congratulates you for surviving today's debate because the negative gives you no solution to survive terrorism. Today's debate is about guaranteeing Americans not only privacy, but the fact that the ability to be alive to enjoy that privacy in the first place. Only the affirmative has a solution to terrorism after a very long but very fruitful debate. Only we have a solution to a problem that they admit exists. This is why the affirmative wins. The role of the negative is to either provide a solution or to prove that we make things worse. They have only proved that we have the only solution to stop terrorism. Now, there's many examples of this that have gone on in today's debate. The San Bernardino shooter, the Paris attacks, the London attacks that just happened at a concert a few weeks ago. The fact that ISIS is on Twitter. These are large and growing concerns that only we have a solution to. That can be cyber attacks, it can be chemical attacks, it can be nuclear attacks that kill thousands of people. Now, this might seem blown out of proportion, but we have provided you 3 reasons why our response to terrorism will inevitably be ineffective without the backdoor key. The first is speed. They want to wait 1 year, 365 days. You will literally have either an entirely different haircut. In 1 year, your body replaces itself. You will not even have the same body in order to respond to terror attacks. They want to spend $1.3 million to get the backdoor key. Now, this is ironic, given that they say that the government doesn't care about minorities, but they want the government to spend money not on minorities, but on hacking. The third problem with this is that they want specialists. Now, they think so poorly about Americans on this side of the debate. But they have conceded that there's not enough Americans who specialize in hacking. Because they're right, we don't do this stuff well. Which is why it is necessary to have a backdoor key in the first place. Now, given the seriousness of this and the fact that only we have a solution, I also find it strange that they keep coming with such silly arguments about flight attendants picking you out and trying to take your iPhone in the middle of a flight, or internet service providers somehow telling you what text messages someone is sending. They don't have a strong grasp of how these things work or how we can actually solve problems of terrorism in the United States. Now, they made a few arguments. One is about safety, about the key being stolen. It's an offline key. You can't hack into it. It would be in a sealed room that's not connected to the internet. This is not a real argument. Their second argument is that it might, then be used by someone else to destroy the economy or to break into your iPhone. My question is who? Who are these people that constantly hack into the US government? They've not named one single terrorist group, one single hacking group, anyone who's actually a threat. The last argument, and the only real argument that they've really made in today's debate that's been substantive, is about discrimination. They said, I don't understand discrimination in the United States. This is funny. But I understand discrimination, but I also understand and remember watching the Twin Towers burn from the hill right outside of my middle school. I understand what it's like to have smog come and envelop your entire, not city, but the state. I remember my teacher running out of the classroom because her husband took the train that goes directly under the Twin Towers. Now I ask you, would you rather hide dirty pictures, or would you rather not have more elementary school students go through that? They don't have a solution. They've got a whole bunch of silly arguments and the promise of a bunch of boogeymen. Don't let elementary students die because they're afraid.
Thank you very much, all speakers. Give them a big hand again. And we'd like to welcome Dr. John Kephart to give us some feedback.
Konnichiwa. For my own students, I would say, how are you all doing? Is how I usually start my American lectures. But before I give some feedback today, I want to thank a couple of people for everything that we've been able to experience while in Japan. We'd like to thank GTEC because we know they did so much great work to sponsor the tour here in Japan, and it's been so meaningful and wonderful for us to do it. I'd also like to thank Inoue Sensei for all of his hard work in putting this effort together. It has been an incredible experience for us, not only here today, but also throughout Japan. The Japanese people are so welcoming and so kind and so giving, and we have really appreciated our time here. And one thing I also thought was really impressive about today's debate is you all speak really good English, and you are really good debaters for never having done this before. I am very impressed. You are better than a lot of my debaters who grew up speaking English their whole lives and have also never debated before. And in particular, in the United States, we've done some research, and people are very scared of public speaking. You heard today that Allison thanked you for surviving your first policy debate, and Eli talked to you about what it means to survive in the United States. People did research, and in the United States, in a poll, 7 out of 10 people would rather be shot in the face than give a speech in public.
Wow, amazing.
70% of people would rather die than do what these debaters did today, which means that the debaters today conquered death and did so very well. I think today's debate had some really important issues. After September 11th, when Colin Powell went to the United Nations, it was trying to get authorization for the United States to attack Iraq. He said that security is more important than liberty sometimes. He says, we don't want the smoking gun for something to be a mushroom cloud over a major American city. In American history, Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers, once said, those who would put security over liberty deserve neither. And so this debate that you've heard over what's more important, should we focus more on rights or liberty, or should we worry more about the consequences of death, is something that has been animating discussion over issues like this in the United States for about 200 years. It's something that we have been talking about for a long time, so it's a very important debate. And to give feedback on this debate, I think there are 3 things that is really important about debating, that you all can learn to be good debaters, and that what the debaters today did very well. The first thing is the idea of clash. Clash is when 2 ideas come into conflict with each other, where we have to pick, is it one or the other? And what a good debate does is it establishes that clash. It tells you, the audience, where those points of clash are. And I think they did that very well in this debate today. One place they did that very well was in the cross-examination period. The cross-examination period I thought was outstanding in this debate. Not only for the Japanese debaters to do a cross-examination with champion American debaters for your first cross-examination ever. That was incredible. But you also did it very well with each other when you hadn't done it before. One thing that new debaters will sometimes do in cross-examination is they will only use the questions to find out what the person said in their speech. And they will say, did you say this? Did you say this? And then move on. What you should be doing in cross-examination, you should make sure you understand the other side's argument, but you want to use it to set up clash, to show the judge or the audience where you're going to disagree. And they did that very well in this debate. You saw a few times they asked questions like, how relevant is the technology in order to be able to unlock the phone? How important is that for the investigation? We also heard, what is more important, people having privacy or people being alive? So when they ask those questions in cross-examination, does this technology actually matter? Is this actually important? That established clash. That helped us as the audience think about, how do we make our decision? And that also happened really well in the overviews in today's debate. The overview is the summary you give at the top of your speech. And I thought all of our debaters today did an excellent job of saying, today we're going to talk about these 3 really important arguments. And I was very impressed by that, because usually new debaters don't do that. And it's a really important skill so you can help the audience understand. Because you all just listened for 90 minutes. It's hard to listen that long, in a long time to listen to a debate, especially in a language that you're not familiar with. So doing that at the beginning and saying, these are the main ideas is really important. The second thing that I thought was done very well today and is very important for argument is you need to develop your arguments and carry them through the entire debate. That a lot of times new debaters, when people learn how to debate, they have a tendency to make their argument and then not explain why their argument is true. So people are so used to agreeing with ideas, or you spend so much time doing your research and you think about it, so it makes sense in your head. But you forget that you have to help other people understand your idea instead of just saying what your idea was. So it's in a debate, you want the debate to evolve. It's like Pokemon. You don't want to start with your first Pokemon, right? You want to evolve them till they get better and they have better powers. It's the same thing in debate, right? That you start with your first argument in your first speech, but then you develop it and you evolve it over the debate so it's stronger at the end. And you saw the debaters do that very well. The negative team started by saying, this is important for privacy generally. And then by the end, they were talking about the importance of rights for minorities and for people that are advocating for social justice. In the beginning, the affirmative talked about the importance of this technology for investigating terrorism, and then developed specific examples about online and offline keys and how the government might use that information. And so developing the argument is really important in debate, and I thought they did it well. Because sometimes we'll say things like, there are bad guys everywhere, and then not explain what that means. But we saw the debaters say, there are bad guys everywhere, that's why we have to take action. Or people will say, rights are important, and then stop. But what you saw the negative do really well is say, rights are important, and here are specific groups and specific examples of people that might lose rights. So developing that idea is really important. The third thing is that we need to create organization. Because listening, and even when you flow and take notes, it's hard to keep track of all of the arguments. And in American debate, we have a phrase called line by line. Do you all have that phrase? Have you heard that before? Line by line debating is, can I borrow your flip paper?
Yes.
So that line by line debating is that if you imagine that you are taking notes all the way down the paper, to do line by line debate means to go line by line in your explanation. So you would say, first they said, now here's my answer. Second they said, now here's my response to that. Thank you. Novice debaters usually don't do that. Do you all play soccer? No? Do you watch soccer? Have you ever watched little children play soccer? Like 5 or 6-year-olds? When grown-ups play soccer, each person has their own job and their own position. So some people are in the front, some people are in the back. When little kids play soccer, they all go for the ball at once. And all of them move around the field. Brand new debaters do the same thing. Brand new debaters make all of the arguments at once. But more experienced debaters separate the arguments out. And they say, first this argument, then this argument. Our debaters today had excellent line by line. I was very impressed by all of the debaters saying, they said about the San Bernardino shooter, but here is why that example doesn't make sense. Or They said that they could hack it, but it's offline. Here's why that doesn't matter. That organization is really important because, as both of the debaters at the end in their last rebuttals told you, the way that you as an audience decide the debate is you have to compare consequences. You have to say which is better, the affirmative or the status quo. Which is better, what we currently do or what we would do instead? And in order to do that, you have to be organized so that you can say, they told you this was true, but here's why it's not. That's called refutation, when you respond or you refute. And that's often the hardest skill to learn in debate, is to make sure that you are specifically responding to what the other side has said and comparing those consequences. So for example, today, the consequences that were compared is, will the government use this new strategy for good or for evil? Will this new strategy only be used effectively by the good guys, or will the bad guys use it too? What is more important, the risk that some people will die, or the risk that we will make things worse if we change things? That is what the debaters today told you was important, and that's what you have to decide. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you about a minute to think about the debate, and then I'm going to ask you who you thought won. None of you have to tell me individually. I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm going to say if you thought the affirmative won, put your hand in the air, and then I'll say if you thought the negative won, put your hand in the air. So think about it for a minute. I'm going to time you, and then after a minute, I'm going to ask you who you thought won, so think carefully. And remember, in debate, you evaluate arguments, not people. So it's okay to vote not for your friends. So if you see your friends like, I need to support my friend, you can support them after, even if they lose. So think about which arguments persuaded you the most. You have 30 more seconds to think.
You don't get
Okay. In America, this is what we call the moment of truth. It's where we find out what happened. Remember, everyone has to vote, and you can only vote once. So don't put your hands up for both teams. Some people did that when we were at Conda. Some people put their hands up for both sides. And you can't vote for both sides. You have to pick one side. If you think the affirmative team won, put your hand up in the air. You gotta put it up high so I can see it. Okay? If you thought the negative team won, put your hand up in the air. It looks like the winners in today's debate were the negative team. A round of applause for everyone. And thank you so much for coming out to participate. We know it takes a lot of work to watch a debate, and we really hope you enjoyed it. And if this is something you think you liked, think about joining the debate team here. It's the best decision I ever made, and it might be the best decision you ever make too. Have a wonderful day.